Hello, and welcome to another of my videos about generating ideas, working with writing prompts, possibly using different sources of inspiration in order to bring about creative writing of various different kinds. This is the second in a video that I will be doing and using on Wednesdays to help other fellow writers, people who already know how to write and are struggling with a bit of writer's block, aspiring writers, people who want to write and feel like they have something to say, but can't seem to get the ideas out. So last week, I talked about using writing prompts in general, how you might use sentence stems, how you might use various different forms of idea generation. And I told you I would be talking to you this week more closely about using images. Okay, so our first generating ideas seminar today is part one, using images. One of the reasons why I wanted to start doing these videos is as a school teacher, as a secondary school teacher, I have heard the two statements at the top of this slide so many times. I don't know what to write. I don't have an imagination. Everybody has an imagination. Everybody has their own voice, their own reason for expression, their own thing to contribute to the creativity of our existence. And so I'm firmly believe that everybody has something to say and everybody has something worth hearing. So in that idea, using photographs is one way to generate information, to generate ideas that you might not normally have. So we are primarily visual creatures. When we are sightless, when we don't have our sight to guide us, our other senses are still useful. We can guide ourselves to particular foods through smell. We can guide ourselves with direction and sound. When we're lost, we can hear people calling us, but primarily we do tend to be visual creatures. The problem is, as a writer, the visual is in our head. And as a reader, we have to interpret the words on the page and create images from those words in our minds. So what writers need to do, especially writers that don't have photographs or illustrations for their work, need to think about using the literary technique of synesthesia. Now, synesthesia has more than one definition, but in literature, synesthesia is the technique that writers can use in order to create a setting or use a description that will play on more than one sense. Take the picture that's inset, for example. If you were trying to give us a fairy tale, if you were trying to set us in a world where there are sea creatures involved, or even if it's just a romance or a nonfiction travelogue, one of the things that almost everybody can connect to is the feelings and senses that are awakened when we're near the sea. So, as you can see in the picture, there is a rock beach and waves hitting the island. This is in Lanzarote. So you can see that these are lava rocks on the rock beach. There is a man-made wall that probably stops the tide from washing out the path at high tide, but the man-made wall uses the local stone in such a way that it almost blends in with the rock beach. So you've got your visual, your texture. If you were to touch the wall, it would be very rough. With the waves, you can hear the sound of the water crashing on the rocks. You can hear seabirds or ocean birds. You can hear other people on the path. You can smell the salt water. You can see the plants and other things that get trapped in the rocks when the tide comes in and goes out again. You feel the sun on your skin. You feel the ocean breeze. And you see the clouds in the sky and where the horizon meets the sea. So many different things, so many different senses that coming into play. You can almost taste the air. So you've got taste, you've got smell, touch, and sight and sound. Everything all kinds of together just by describing, either in full sentence form or in short, sharp sentences, factual, this image. And with this one image, once you set the scene, you can put your characters in it. And we'll talk a little bit about that, more about that later. But giving everybody that reads your work a basis, whether it's a poem or a novel, a thing they can connect with. All the weird stuff, all the unusual stuff or unique stuff about your writing piece falls into place if you synesthetically use language to put someone in that place. They can feel it, they can see it, they can hear it. Whenever we describe, we paint that picture with words, just like I described the waves to you in the previous slide. Whether it's poetry, fiction, or even some types of nonfiction, speeches, reports, persuasive opinion pieces about climate change, we paint a picture. In poetry, it's particularly effective in haiku, because in haiku, the experience, the flash of momentary insight is reduced down to 17 syllables in English. The idea behind haiku is to freeze that moment, that precise instance, that precise feeling, experience, and image into as few syllables as possible. And by refining and refining that, we do what the camera does. We take a snapshot. We will be talking a little bit more about haiku later on as I do another video on different forms that you can use and how you might go about using it, using some examples. The fiction setting of description helps you move your plot along, give you placeholders and tension breaks in your plots. When you have too much tension over too long a period of time, you lose your audience. They get compassion fatigue, they get tension fatigue, and they stop paying attention to what you're telling them. It starts to lose its effect. And so using description for characters and places like the Rialto market in Venice, that helps the reader kind of immerse themselves in the fiction. For nonfiction, diary entries, where you might reflect on it later, go back into your diary and remember experiences you had by having the descriptive passages is very important. When you're writing letters or postcards to your family back home, you want the experience to be as descriptive as possible so that they feel like they're there with you. Recounts and biographies, reports, any type of writing that we do, we almost always have to do some kind of description. Describing the problem, describing the experience and the emotion. Using images to capture that really helps because you as a writer can put yourself back in the moment you took the photograph, and then you can get your reader into the moment by fully and totally describing the photograph. That was a busy day. It was February. It was miserable. I know Venice is supposed to be warm. I know Venice is supposed to be got the smelly canals and all of that. This was the week after Carnivale. It was February. It was almost British weather, which I had just left. So I was acclimated to it, but I was a little disappointed for Italy. The market itself was beautiful. All of the different wares, all of the different foods were incredible. So it's always really nice to be able to reconnect with the experience and pass that on to the reader in any type of writing that you're doing. This involves you being observant. We can't pass on what the senses take in if we aren't aware of the senses ourselves. So there is almost constantly input from our senses coming at us all the time, so much so that we filter it out. When you're in a noisy room or you're at a party and you're trying to listen to just the person you're in conversation with, you tune out the background noise of other conversations all around you as much as you can. We tend to do that in our day-to-day life. We filter what we take in, but it's always there if you want to access it. So, for example, the picture here, the waterfall that we're looking at, there are loads of different sounds that if I put myself back in that place, I can access. I can remember, if I'm being observant, the sound of the water in the pool, the animals that might be in the forest or in the undergrowth, birds, squirrels, whatever, the leaves and the branches that are moving in the wind. That sound is very distinctive and often very relaxing, unless we're in a storm, and then it's frightening and tension. Unless we are in the winter when the leaves aren't even there and the branches scraping across each other create tension and a spooky atmosphere. So all of the sounds can add to that emotion as long as we are aware of them happening when we are trying to. The grit under your feet, which is something people don't usually think about as far as a sound. You usually think of that as a tactile impulse where you can feel it on your feet, your bare feet, or you can feel it underneath your shoes, especially if you're running in a tense piece and you slip on the gravel, you feel it in your palms when you land on the gravel. Those are touch sensations, but you also hear gravel. When you are running from someone and you trip on the gravel, you can hear the footsteps behind you on the same gravel. So this being observant is kind of a multisensory synesthetic impulse that we need to really foster when we try to create an environment in which our stories can live, where they can feel realistic, no matter how far-fetched they are, fantasy, science fiction. Being able to access our observational skills when we build the scene, when we world build or we create a new place, it will make it more real for the reader. So we have the sights as well, sunlight filtering through the trees, sunlight on the pool, sunlight on my feet, the reflection of the water, all of this kind of dealing with light and shade and different colors in the rocks, in the plants, in the animals, in the sky, between the plants. These are all things you can access. I'm sitting at a desk. I'm looking at the light of my computer, the blue light of the electronic, like so many of us attached to Zoom these days, the feel of my wooden desk, the smooth finish. I can hear the running of the fan on my laptop. I can smell the coffee that I really want to take a sip of, but all of those things are all part of our everyday momentary experience. If I shift around, it's because my chair is uncomfortable. That can be a combination of my muscles and the chair itself. So when we're thinking about setting a scene and creating an environment in which our characters have things happen to them, whether it's being chased in the grit, in the dirt by the waterfall, whether it's jumping off the waterfall, cliff diving into the water, whatever is happening to our characters, whether it's just relaxation or whether it's an event, being observant helps us be there, helps us have that backdrop, that dramatic set design for our words in our writing. Using images can help you do that because you can really get into the minutia of what's in the image, what's in the setting, if you're looking at it and remembering being there. So, second idea about being observant is actually when you have a large quantity of characters or when you have people. Crowds and activities can involve not just a number of setting issues, not just a number of your sounds, but also experience. So that old saying, write what you know is as true as it gets. A lot of poetry and fiction, literary nonfiction, comes from capturing and sharing experiences that we have, that other people have either had almost exactly the same experience themselves, or they have had something tertiary to it, something close to it. And so when we're in the moment, if you're watching a sporting event, it's very often difficult to process all the sensory information you're getting in order to use it for writing later. So when you use a photograph of that same kind of crowd event, that same kind of activity, you can revisit it when you're no longer interested in who's got the ball and who's scoring, and you can kind of review and reflect and think on what you might have missed in the moment and remind yourself of the emotions that you felt in that fast action-paced moment. The roar of the crowd, the disappointment when they miss, the cheer and elation and shouting when they win, all of those things you can reflect on later if you're using an image of an action shot. If you are trying to write a biographical thing and you have a picture of your graduation ceremony, obviously you're concentrating on not falling on your face, you're concentrating on listening for your name, you're concentrating on acquiring your diploma, finding your family in the crowd, all of the things you're concentrating when you're in the moment. But if you use a photograph that your family took later of you up there in the experience, you can then include your character's experience in the same kind of moment. You can reflect on everything you felt, everything you heard, saw, smelled, whatever, and make the experience more dynamic, make it more real. Images of crowds and activities make that reflection easier. Images make it more based in reality. And so even if, for example, you have a football game going on and some kind of earthquake makes the ground fall out from under them, having already established the activity you're participating in and all of the description of that experience, it makes it that much more dynamic and stark when the experience changes in a way that people haven't had. Not many people I know have experienced an earthquake, which sucks in a sinkhole into the middle of a football field. But we do all know what a sporting event feels like. So being in the moment makes the next bit, the earthquake bit that we haven't experienced, more plausible, more acceptable, because it comes right on the back of an activity that we have experienced. So last slide here, give it a try. Use either one of my own images or go through on your phone or your camera or in your computer. If you are ever going to use an image that's not your own, make sure you give credit to the photographer, unless you're not including pictures in your bit of writing, unless you're not including pictures in what you're doing, then obviously you're just using it as a stimulus. But any pictures on my web pages, any pictures on my PowerPoints are pictures and photographs I have taken myself. So I try to use in my writing prompts, I try to use in all of my idea generation videos and ideas, things that are either out there in the free or are my own. For example, taking pictures of a cactus. Are you the flower? Are you the cactus? Are you the person walking through the cactus farm? How would you use that kind of sensory experience of a cactus flower in a survival scenario? Maybe your character is trapped in the desert, they pass out, they have no idea how they got there, and the first thing they see is the cactus. And if you describe it in minute detail, you can get the sense that the character's confusion. You can get the sense of the character's lack of familiarity. People have been to amusement parks and Disney World and gardens with statues and flown in planes and seen the lights from above, been through holiday scenarios, whether it's a Christmas tree or whether it's a menorah or whether it is Diwali, Festival of Lights. We have all had ceremonial occasions and celebrations with family that we can use where we have taken pictures. So it's very, very important that you use images, your own or someone else's, to stimulate writing. When you are using the image, be observant. Think about all the different senses that you could access when you reflect on being in that moment. And then as you move on from observation, as you move on from world building and scene setting, add the activities. Make it real by using something that is true. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. I'm hoping to talk about haiku next week and then go on further with other idea generation videos and workshops in my YouTube, Leah-The-Dreamer. Thank you for listening, and I hope that you'll join me again another time. Bye.